We all can't wait for college football week 1. I can't wait for this one. Cincinnati, Arkansas, other games across the nation gaining more attention, but this one's intriguing. We'll check it out with Ty Hudson from Hogville and also Steve Helweg. You can catch him on SB Nation on Underdog Dynasty and Hustle Belt. Guys, how we doing today?
I'm doing well, doing solid. Looking forward to it. I think this is the first time I've actually been on with someone other than just you and I, Mark, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, probably the best way this is going to work is for me to get out of the way and let you guys talk some football. But I'll get things started up. And, of course, everyone in the live stream knows the deal. Leave those comments and questions there in the live chat. And get on over to Hogville right here on YouTube after we're done and check out the content there. Check out Steve's work on SB Nation, Underdog Dynasty, and Hustle Belt. Ty, you just got a depth chart in your hand, I understand.
Yeah, pretty neat. Got the email just a little bit ago, as I was telling you before we started recording. No real surprises. Nothing that's like, oh, my God, didn't see that happening. Other than maybe Chambly, freshman, going to be the backup behind Luke Jones at left tackle. Kind of looking over it. No real surprises. I'd keep an eye on number 53, Tykees Crawford, this week. May or may not get an opportunity at right guard. We're kind of waiting to see. Bo Limmer, we were told, got a little banged up. Should be good to go this week. If not, Crawford would sounds like he's going to be the guy if anything were to happen or if Bo Limmer were unavailable for the game.
Let's get it revved up in this fashion. We know Hog fans would be ecstatic, going out of their minds if Notre Dame or Ohio State were coming to town or somebody like that. What's the interest level in this Cincinnati team?
Oh, man. It's they've played some great non-conference games over the years, and recent history, talking about before last year, they didn't always end up in the best way for Razorback fans because you lost some of these games. I'm talking about non-P5, the bottom tier, North Texas teams and so on and so forth. Now you fast forward into year 3 under Sam Pittman, and it adds a level of excitement because you feel like, well, wait a minute. Cincinnati went to the playoffs a year ago, played against Bama, lost that game by 21, if I remember right, and but still a very worthy team of going to the playoffs. That's what's coming to town week 1. That's incredible. This is the first time, I think, dating back to 1980, where Arkansas was ranked and their opponent was ranked coming into week 1. First time, I think, now someone may have to correct me if I'm wrong, that may be in Fayetteville, but I'm pretty sure that's the total history. It's the first time where Arkansas was ranked and their opponent was also ranked for their week 1 matchup. So, yeah, it's palpable when you drive through Fayetteville. Fans are excited for this one.
Steve, we pretty much know the narrative, college football fans, about Cincinnati. Luke Fickell, the first group of 5 to ascend to the playoffs, undefeated regular season conference championship, as Ty just outlined, despite a 21-point loss to Alabama. Shoot, there are all sorts of Power 5 conference champions losing by 3 and 4 touchdowns in playoff games. But the 2 corners gone, Sauce Gardner, Kobe Bryant, Desmond Ridder off to the NFL as well. What do we need to know about this Cincinnati team?
Yes, Luke Fickell's still there, which is always a good thing. He's really rebuilt this program after some bad years under Tommy Tuberville. So Luke Fickell has really resurrected Cincinnati back to the point where it was when Brian Kelly was there in 2009. And they made the college football playoff last year, which they also would have done in 2009 if they had it back then. So Cincinnati's back up to the top, but this is a big offseason of rebuilding. Only Georgia and LSU produced more 2022 NFL draft picks than the Bearcats, which they had 9. And a lot of those were day 1 and day 2 picks. You mentioned Sauce Gardner, Kobe Bryant being some of the major names out, and Desmond Ridder, who started almost every game at quarterback across the last 4 years for Cincinnati, never losing a single home game and having more wins in college football than any quarterback not named Kellen Moore or Colt McCoy all time. So that's what you're having to replace. The good news is Cincinnati still retains all 5 of its offensive linemen from a decent line last year. And as you saw in the Northwestern Nebraska game on Saturday, having a good, experienced offensive line can carry your offense a long way, even if you don't have an explosive offense. Just the protection Ryan Helinski received in that game from Northwestern's line shows how vital it is to have good offensive line play. So Cincinnati does have that going into their favor as they're looking to restructure their team. A lot of the skill position guys changed. The quarterback has yet to be determined. Unlike Arkansas, no depth chart has been released yet. Is either Evan Prater, who was the backup last year, mainly a running quarterback, and the reps he got passed a few times, but not too substantially. He's competing with former Cincinnati quarterback Ben Bryant, who had a boomerang transfer. He left Cincinnati to go to Eastern Michigan last year, won the job at Eastern Michigan, had a pretty decent season leading the Eagles to 7 wins, and now he's back on campus at Cincinnati competing with Prater for the job. That has not been announced yet, but around them they have some somewhat experienced skill position players and running back Ryan Montgomery, who should take over for Jerome Ford, and then a receiving core featuring Trey Tucker and Tyler Scott, who were some of the secondary and tertiary contributors under Alec Pierce, who had a bulk of the receiving core last year. Great tight ends, too, on offense, and then defense, which has been the signature of Cincinnati's program over the past few years. They lose their cornerbacks, but they still have very talented, experienced defensive line play. The linebackers are also good because they restocked with Ivan Pace, the brother of Deshaun Pace, who was a really good coverage linebacker last year. So I think this defense can still be one of the best in the AAC, probably the best besides Houston. So I think that they have a lot going into this matchup, going into their favor, and that's why they're still ranked in the top 25 despite this massive turnover.
What do you need to know about Arkansas football, Steve? Anytime we see a group of 5 versus a power 5, the ability, the depth and the top end talent is in question in regards to, okay, does this team have enough NFL draft type players to compete with the said team, especially from the SEC? And then the other one is, even if they can hang for 3 quarters, is there going to be an issue in the 4th quarter with depth?
I don't think that should apply to this matchup. And honestly, when you talk about group of 5 matchups against Arkansas, other than last year, the favor was usually in the group of 5 team. We saw what North Texas and Western Kentucky and San Jose State did to this Arkansas team. But Sam Pittman's really rebuilt the squad. And this is a good Arkansas squad. Last year, they were first in the SEC in rushing, and they have a lot of that rushing talent back, including their quarterback, KJ Jefferson, who's just built like Dante Culpepper and runs really well. And I honestly would not be surprised if we saw Arkansas rotate in the backup quarterback, Malik Hornsby, into this game. What he did in the Outback Bowl against Penn State last year, providing a different type of running style than Jefferson, but still making sure that the unit goes well. I think that Arkansas really has a lot of talent in the run game, and Cincinnati's defense, that will be the major factor that they need to stop in this game. Arkansas no longer has Treylon Burks in the receiving core, so I think it's really going to be the run game that Cincinnati needs to contain in order to win this one.
Ty, you set us up with the wide receivers the last time we got together in regards to trying to replace one Treylon Burks, and you were encouraged, as opposed to how you felt 3 or 4 weeks ago, that they're going to have the quality in the room, even if they don't have the top end guy like a Treylon Burks.
Well, I mean, they have a former Georgia guy, Matt Landers, who was not highly recruited, but he was a 3-star, didn't do a whole lot there. Like you and I discussed, he transferred to Toledo, had some good moments there, and he walks into this camp, and Sam Pittman said it himself. That was our biggest question mark, was the wide receiver room. Every day that I was there, I went to every fall camp besides maybe 2 wideouts. It became an expectation that the wideouts were going to be the leading group on the field. You've got former 5-star Jaden Hazelwood out of Oklahoma, who, he had some great moments, led them in a couple of categories last year, but felt like he kind of underperformed over there. He's come over here, and he's been a pretty consistent individual in that wide receiver room. And so then you talk about Warren Thompson, another guy who you and I love all so much, Mark. I know you love it when I talk about Warren Thompson. He transferred in a little while back from Florida State, and he had some moments a year ago. He has had a fantastic fall camp, consistent. The freshman, #1 player in the state of Arkansas, 4-star track star, Isaiah Centenia. He's looked steady. I think he still has a little ways to go in the playbook, but he looks steady. Wasn't here for the spring. So he's a little bit behind in those regards. You've got Quincy McAdoo, 4-star. I mean, you feel like the talent in that room, you could probably argue it's the most talented on paper part of this roster. Between that and maybe the offensive line, clearly the running backs, Rocket Sanders and Dominic Johnson, who will not be available for this game. AJ Green, another former track guy, 4-star running back out of Oklahoma. They have talent. I don't think there's any question about that. I think the curiosity is in certain positions. Where are they? Left tackle. You got a guy that's been mostly interior most of his college career, actually all of it. Was at Notre Dame for a little while, and then he came back home. Luke Jones out at left tackle. Is he going to be consistent? And what's going on over there? You've had some injuries, so much so that Chambly's your backup, a true freshman. Not that he's not deserving of it. He's a 4-star, highly touted kid out of high school. But there are some certain individuals, and then there's some certain groups. I kind of wonder about the defensive line. I could go on about that all day. I've had issues with the defensive line really since Sam Pittman took over. They've never recruited at a high level there, and it shows on the field. They've gone through 3 different defensive line coaches. It's clear that the defensive line needs to be a point of emphasis moving forward with recruiting, and I think that is going to be the case going into next year's class. But the receivers were arguably throughout all fall camp, I think the best looking group, and Matt Landers is going to be a problem. We'll see how Cincy handles these wideouts. It's going to be an interesting matchup between the wideouts and, like you mentioned too, the run game will be interesting to see as well. With 4 out of your 5 starting offensive linemen back up front, your entire backfield minus Dominic Johnson, this is an intriguing matchup.
It is. Ty, Steve, I'll get out of your way to a certain extent here. Ty, what would be those areas that you would like to know a little bit more about the Bearcats to either be more concerned or more optimistic about Arkansas's ability to survive this one?
Well, again, one of the other question marks for Arkansas was the secondary, and they brought in Latavius Burney and Dwight McLaughlin, a couple cats from one from LSU, one from Georgia. And he brought in Drew Sanders, linebacker, but good talent there. But the corner spot, defensive back spot is, I'm a little bit. I am just as surprised that Hudson Clark has held on to that starting job as anybody else. You and I talked about that last time I was here. He's still there. Ladarius Bishop is still there. I'm again flipping to that side of the ball. I don't know how they're going to do against this Bearcat offense. I know they don't. I think they only threw for 300 plus yards. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think twice all of last year. Maybe 4 or 5 games where a receiver went over 100 yards. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm curious how their pass game matches up against Arkansas secondary. That's a question that I have for anyone, Bearcat Nation or who we have with us right now. Like I don't know. That's the most intriguing thing that I have is that matchup because, like we mentioned, the quarterback situation that they have going on.
Well, if I'm Cincinnati, the number one guy I'm fearing in that secondary is Jalen Catalon, who kind of plays that center fielder role. He did really well in pass coverage last year in his limited games where he was available. But I think that Catalon is going to be a real spark for Arkansas in this game, and that's the guy that Cincinnati must avoid. But yeah, I do think that Cincinnati's matchup with their receivers and corners could be an interesting one. Those aren't the more talented position groups on either team, so somebody's going to have to emerge and break out. A lot of Cincinnati's passing game last year was centered on Alec Pierce, who's now in the NFL. So they need to break out new talent. Tyler Scott is the deep threat last year that I think could be the number one guy this year. I think it was the first play of the season last year against Miami where they just ran a deep ball to I think that one was to Tyler Scott, and he scored a touchdown. And that just sparked Cincinnati's entire season from there. He's a guy that gets behind, beats you deep in coverage. Other receivers on the team, Jaden Thompson and Trey Tucker, are more of short and medium threats that Cincinnati has on the offense. Then I'm interested to see how Nick Bardner fits into this receiving core because in terms of stats, he's posted the most in his career of all the Cincinnati receivers because he was a nearly 1,000-yard threat at Hawaii last year in a Hawaii program that almost everyone transferred out this offseason. So getting Nick Mardner could be a pretty big get for this team. But the best players in the receiving core for Cincinnati are the tight ends. I don't know if there's any college football team outside of Georgia who has Bowers and
I was
Eric
going to jump on that one for a second.
I would say who has Brock Bowers
Georgia.
and Eric Gilbert that has two tight ends as deep as Cincinnati with Josh Wiley and Leonard Taylor. You saw them pick apart Notre Dame last year, both in blocking and as receivers. So I think Cincinnati's going to target the tight ends a lot in this game. So Arkansas's linebackers and Jalen Catalon are going to have to be on their game and guarding Leonard Taylor and Josh Wiley, because those are two big threats that can have pretty versatile route trees and can get downfield or be short yardage options.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Looking at that, and you mentioned Mardner. I watched quite a bit of his film actually from a year ago. He's a problem, and you're right too about the tight ends. Weil is a hell of a tight end. I don't think that there's any doubt that guy would come into the SEC and do just fine. They're in good shape, and the more this has been, and I know Mark will probably get to this later, but this is the biggest coin flip game for me all year, because I'm having such a hard time with it. At first, I looked at it and I said, well, Arkansas is going to kill them. They've lost too much. There's too much turnover. Nobody survives that. I realized what they did a year ago, and I realized they still have one of arguably the best head coaches in college football, but there's no way. And then you start looking at their transfers, who they have coming back, their offensive line. This is it's a good week one matchup. Some great football right out the gate, Mark. So I am fascinated. I've got so many questions lined up for this game on my Discord kind of secret server that I have that I'm going to take with me to the game, and I'm going to see if they what boxes this game checks off. This could be, I feel like it's going to be one of two things. It's either going to be a high scoring, something could get out of hand, or it's going to be, over under, 55 points kind of game. And I agree with the assessment on the tight ends. That is going to be a very interesting matchup to see how they key in on those guys and if they can limit what they're able to do.
So, Ty, I'm going to put the AD hat on here for a second for Arkansas.
We're not at Auburn, are we?
Why do you schedule this game? What's that?
I said we're not at Auburn, are we?
No, we're not at Auburn, and I know that again, we're just playing here, folks. So Arkansas fans, don't be alarmed here. You're not going to have to deal with me as an AD, but you schedule not just one of these, you schedule two of these, and when I say two of these, I'm talking about a game that is a losable game that Arkansas is not going to get a whole lot of credit for if they win. If Arkansas wins this game by a touchdown, then later goes to BYU, wins that game by a touchdown, they have beaten two really good football teams, and the nation, SEC fans, won't give Arkansas the credit that they would get from beating the fourth or fifth best team in the Big Ten or the ACC or somewhere else.
Tough matchups. I mean, you can even look at that Missouri State game on the 17th after South Carolina, and I get it. They're not. It's Missouri State, but we know who the head coach is. I mean, if you don't think he's going to come in with at least a chip on his shoulder or something, or maybe he just wants to show out that he still got it, Bobby Petrino is going to walk into Fayetteville, and that might at first be a ball game. You never know, especially with Arkansas's history. Different head coach, though. We got to be fair, right?
Yes.
This is – I said this earlier. I had a QB Spotlight on, Stephen Hamner on this morning during my live for Tuss Talk with Ty, the other YouTube channel that I manage. And we talked about the strength of schedule. And I said, back in 2020 when, we did a conference-only schedule and the SEC and all of its infinite wisdom decided to give us both Florida and Georgia on an already incredibly difficult schedule, I thought there would never be a schedule to top that. I thought that was the toughest schedule I've ever seen. You got to understand the circumstances during COVID and so on and so forth. But this is, I think, the toughest schedule they have ever played. This is preseason, the hardest schedule I think I've ever seen, period. Cincinnati out the gate. South Carolina is going to be improved, I think. Spencer Rattler is going to do just fine. And as you alluded to, you still got BYU at Provo, Utah, and then Liberty, right? Like, I don't know, man. This is it's a mouthful. There's a lot to deal with this schedule, a lot going on. If they tie their record a year ago, I think Hog fans ought to be pretty damn proud of that, because this is a really, really tough grind. We know the SEC West is already tough, but then you add in Cincinnati, you add in BYU, you add in Liberty, so on and so forth. It's just if you like big challenges, if you like playing NCAA football on Heisman mode, here you go. This is the schedule right here.
I did a difficulty rank on this Arkansas schedule. I put Missouri 10th. If I remember correctly, did I put them 10th? Yeah.
10th as far as difficulty or
yes, Missouri.
Liberty 11th and the FCS team 12th.
Yeah. Because of what you just outlined, the entire SEC West and the South Carolina game. Yeah. And the two out of conference games.
That's ridiculous. I mean, that's, and I don't want to be that SEC homer guy. I don't. I hate this conference. Anyone who watches my content, I hate this conference. They shovel crap on Arkansas all the time. Don't get me started on the infamous Auburn ending where Arkansas wins the game, but because SEC officials are, I don't know, their heads up their rears, don't know how to officiate a game. Arkansas lost that game. That's because of SEC officiating. They gave Arkansas the toughest, only conference schedule in 2020. That was the toughest. No one had it harder. I'm sorry. And then kind of the way they've rearranged things, it's just, I hate this conference. But I am going to say the SEC West is the most difficult conference, or part of this conference, period, in the already most difficult conference in the country. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say something that I'm going to regret later, but I sometimes I'm just like, I wish the hell they weren't in this conference, because and not because of the difficulty, but because of the way the SEC kind of treats those teams that aren't Alabama, that aren't Florida, that aren't Georgia. But at the same time, I'm also happy to be here. I'm happy to take that check, baby. You're talking about almost $50 million or whatever it is, their deal that they have with SEC Network. Love that. And I love competitive games, but the way they kind of treat Arkansas, you do feel like the little brother in your own conference in football. Of course, baseball and basketball, it's another story. But yeah, it's tough, Mark. And it's not going to get any easier adding Oklahoma and Texas.
Speaking of which, while Texas and Oklahoma switched to the SEC, of course, Cincinnati's making a move to the Big 12. So, Steve, in light of a team that has gone on a tremendous run for 3 or 4 years, we don't know how much that's tied to the coach, but as you outlined, other coaches have succeeded there at a high level. So it's not just Luke Fickell showed up and this became something that it's never been, but obviously he's got this program operating at near the highest level in the history of the school. Now they transition to the Big 12. How do you see them competing in the Big 12 and maintaining or possibly upgrading their status on the college football landscape?
Yeah, before I get to that, one thing that many people do not realize is, do you remember that Texas-Nebraska Big 12 championship game in 2009 when Mac Brown wanted that extra second?
Yes.
If he did not get that extra second, Cincinnati is in the national championship game against Alabama. Cincinnati finished number 3 in the BCS standings that year. I think that is an underrated talking point about how close Cincinnati has been to competing in a national championship game before. Yes, they did get crushed by Florida without Brian Kelly in that Sugar Bowl too, and Tim Tebow's final collegiate game. But point aside, I think that this team is well apt to fit in the Big 12 already. They took Notre Dame down on the road pretty easily last year, 24-13, allowed a little bit of a mini comeback in there, but dominated that game the most part. And I think Luke Fickell's just built a juggernaut of a program that can really succeed almost in any conference. You saw other teams make seamless transitions. Utah has the best record in the Pac-12 in the college football playoff era, and they came from the Mountain West. TCU has the 3rd best record in the Big 12 in the college football playoff era, only behind Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. So I think that Cincinnati could have a similar transitions to the Utahs and the TCU's. I mean, this team has a big fan base. They generate more money than most AAC programs. They have really good recruiting classes that rank among the top in the AAC. But more importantly than recruiting class and all that is they get results. And this is a team that's getting double-digit wins every single year. They got that marquee win against Notre Dame last year. They're increasing their national exposure with a college football playoff appearance, something only 13 programs in the country can claim. That's very elite company for Cincinnati at this point. So I think that they'll adjust fine to the Big 12 as long as Fickell stays there. And the fact that he didn't take the Notre Dame job this offseason makes me think that the only job that he would leave Cincinnati for is Ohio State, because those Michigan State and Notre Dame openings have been his for the taking the last 2 off seasons. So I think he's there for the long run, unless that Ryan Day for some reason leaves his alma mater at Ohio State.
Arkansas, Cincinnati, we thought this one was important enough to break it down live. So we got Ty Hudson here from hogville.net. You can catch his work in terms of video right here on YouTube. Hogville, that's all you need to know. Put in Hogville. You'll catch Ty's work right here on YouTube. And Steve Helwig, SB Nation, we rely on Steve and Will a number of times this week for all these group of 5 matchups against the likes of Michigan, Oklahoma, and USC. And Steve's works on SB Nation, on Hustle Belt, and on Underdog Dynasty. Ty, so you're giving Arkansas little chance of overthrowing the giant in the SEC West?
I have to. So I had originally said I'm going to release my wins and losses today. I've had to change that to Friday, mostly because I got QB Spotlight on this morning. I thought, oh my gosh, we could break down the Cincinnati game pretty well and talk about what he wanted to see and so on and so forth. I'm going to push that to Friday, but I will say that 10 games is their ceiling. I don't know what the basement is for them. Maybe 6-6 at their worst. I think 6-6. But with how difficult the schedule is, we can't overlook that. And I know Hog fans are going to be on me for that. About harping on that so much, because we have to deal with it every year in the West. But this year it's even more difficult. There are no real off weeks. I do think when the dust settles at the end of the year, we're going to look back and we're going to go, okay, it wasn't as bad as we thought it was, but it was still a really tough schedule. Like I said, preseason, it's the toughest schedule in college football, period.
Are there hopes among Arkansas fans that this can be an elite program?
Say that again?
Are there hopes among Arkansas fans that this can be an elite program?
For this year or for as long as
term?
That's a good question. Yes, because of the quick turnaround by Sam Pittman. You know me, I try not to be overly biased. I try not to be overly biased, but the job that he's done here is pretty incredible. I mean, it's not common that a coach comes in and is able to take over a dumpster fire of a program in the toughest conference and to find a way to get 8 wins and then a bowl win over Penn State in the Outback Bowl. That's hard to do here, and he did it. And the ceiling is I think it's 10 wins. I don't want to give it away, but I think that's their ceiling, 10 wins, and they'll do well. But Bama, I mean, come on, it's the same.
In asking that, I'm just curious as to whether there's a mentality. So I was in the SEC for 7 years at Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Alabama. That was our coverage area, so that's what I was covering. And this was not Alabama Nick Saban. This was Alabama Mike Dubose and others, late 1990s, early 2000s. And a Mississippi State Ole Miss fan is looking for 8-4. Let's pull out a win or two that we can feel good about and get to a nice bowl game. If Arkansas fans are in that mode, or they're thinking, we've got this guy that took us from the ashes just a couple of years ago to respectability to like a top 15 type team last year. If we make the right moves, put the right facilities together, NIL, all the components that they have to deal with now, we can be the next Texas A&M, Georgia that's knocking on the door.
Yeah, they have everything in place to be a really good program. By the way, your chat, I think they need hearing aids or something. They need to hear me a little clearer. I'm not saying Arkansas is winning 10 games. I never said that. I said their ceiling is 10 wins. I'm giving my official predictions, and those of you who can't hear, you're more than welcome to stop by on Tuss Talk with Ty, and I'll tell you what I think they do. I don't have Arkansas winning 10 games. I think that's in their wheelhouse, but they're not getting there. They're not getting. I don't think they get there. I'll just say that. But they're close. They got a tough schedule. They got talent. They're overlooked a lot, rightfully so, because they haven't earned that right yet. They haven't earned that right to be mentioned as one of those teams to win 10 games a year. They're not there yet. Sam's got a lot more proven to do. But like I said, he's off to a fantastic start. Year 2 to do what he did. Lost to Bama on the road by 7 points. I mean, not that Bama was in any threat of losing that game, but they played pretty damn good against Bama on the road. Georgia was the only game last year. I'd say Georgia and Auburn were head scratchers. I mean, Georgia, not a head scratcher. Auburn was a head scratcher. But I think they're going to be just fine this year. I think they're going to be a good team. They're going to be tough. They're not going to be an easy out for anybody.
The chat also needs for me to give them a lecture on the best division in college football. It's not the Big Ten East. The Big Ten East is extremely, the top heavy portion of it's great. Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, but then it falls off the cliff. The SEC West, it's not. I tell people this all the time in regards to best conference and best division in a conference. I would love if we could have a debate about that. I want to have a debate, but it's null and void right now. There is no debate. The SEC is the best conference. I want to have that debate. I want the results to be so cloudy and so conflicted with who wins these games or those postseason games or whatever that we, at the end of the year, like, okay, we really need to dissect this, but it's not worth doing right now. So
it makes college football better. It makes college football better. If I wish the SEC, I mean, it's difficult because you appreciate what these teams have done in this conference to make it what it is. These buyouts are awesome, right? Or these deals, they're awesome. The TV revenue is great, but sometimes I do root against Bama. I do root against Georgia. I hate this conference. I think that's important for people to understand. I hate this conference. I respect it, but I hate it.
Ed, that correlation is ridiculous right there. Anyway. Not only is Arkansas so much better right this second, Arkansas on its last splash at the top was Bobby Petrino, top 5, top 10. Maryland hasn't done that in decades. Steve, you're our group of 5 guy. So outside of Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, and then the next tier of whether you consider that Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Baylor, whomever else, looking at what Cincinnati did last year, who could be the Cincinnati this year from the group of 5 to break up the party? Who's got the schedule path, the talent, the coaching to possibly pull off a mini miracle?
I think I've come on here saying this before, but Houston has a clear path to 12-0, but I don't think they have a clear path to a playoff appearance. Their non-conference schedule consists of Texas Tech, Kansas, UTSA, and Rice. There's no FCS team on there, and UTSA won a conference championship, almost finished ranked last year. Great team, 12-2. Texas Tech would have to probably win the Big 12 in order for Houston to even have a chance with the schedule. Houston avoids UCF and Cincinnati, who were picked 2nd and 3rd in the AAC preseason media poll, with Houston being 1st. Barely edging out the Bearcats. So I think that Houston has the schedule. They'll be the AAC wins against a New Year's Six Bowl every single year. It's happened every year since 2015, except for 2016 Western Michigan, who went undefeated. That was a weird year where Temple won the conference. And the AAC pretty much gets an automatic New Year's Six Bowl invite, and I think Houston gets that this year. I think SMU is another team that you can look for among there, because they have a lot of returning talent with Tanner Mordecai, and I really like the look of their front 7 in Rhett Lashley's first year on campus. But Houston's the team to beat in the AAC this year. They have one of the best defensive lines in the country, great pass rush. Clayton Tune is probably, if he's not a top 5 quarterback territory, he's closing in on it after a tremendous season last year where his numbers took a spike all across the board. Tank Dell might be as electrifying as any receiver in the country in terms of playmaking ability. So Houston certainly has the talent to do that. But you were talking about a Cincinnati path. The Cincinnati path is almost impossible because let's review what Cincinnati had to do to lock up the 4 seed last year. Not the 1, 2, or 3, but they got the 4 seed. They had to have down years for the Big 12, Pac-12, and
Clemson.
and ACC champions. All of those finished with multiple losses heading into bowl season. And they also had to beat Notre Dame, and Notre Dame had to end up really good number 5 just for Cincinnati to get number 4 in that college football rankings beforehand. They had to have a long line of tasks go into their favor, and it somehow did. And they did all that just to clinch the 4 seed. And they also had to come in with the preseason reputation from the prior year, being in the New Year's Six Bowl against Georgia, and they were highly preseason ranked, which helped them establish that position that 2017 UCF didn't have. Because 2018 UCF got a higher ranking than 2017 UCF, and everyone knows 2017 UCF was the better team, but 2018 UCF had the reputation. So I think that the reputation from the year before also plays into the factor. So Cincinnati had that going in their favor. They had Notre Dame winning every other game on the schedule going in their favor. And then I said Oklahoma State, they lost that Big 12 championship game. I still think Cincy gets in, even if they get that extra yard. And then Clemson had down year, which caused Pitt to win the ACC championship game with multiple losses. And then the Pac-12 always cannibalizes itself every year anyway. So it's a lot of help that they needed.
You think they would have selected Cincinnati undefeated over 12-1 Oklahoma State with a Big 12 championship?
I think they would have. Although Oklahoma State's only loss on that schedule was pretty controversial to Iowa State, where it looked like they had a first down in that game and they didn't get it called in their favor. But yeah, I still think Cincinnati with the undefeated record edges out Oklahoma State.
All right, guys, I want to respect your time. This is all about Cincinnati and Arkansas. We appreciate everybody being here. If you missed most of the conversation, obviously the video posts. You can watch what you missed. Ty, for those folks that don't usually watch Arkansas football, but say, hey, this is one of those games I got to see on week 1, who's a player 2, 3 that you think, hey, keep an eye on this guy. He's a player. We'll take Jalen Catalon off the map. We're going to go a little bit more hardcore since he is an All-American. And KJ Jefferson, my question /B bullet point under that would be hype for KJ Jefferson as a Heisman candidate and how much you think that that's reasonable to dream.
I don't see KJ as a Heisman candidate.
Okay.
I don't. I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be top 4. You've got Hooker at Tennessee, of course. We know who's at Bama. There's a couple other quarterbacks I don't know that we're talking enough about in the SEC, but he'll be in that conversation as one of the top 3, top 4 quarterbacks in the SEC, simply because of what he is in the offense, his ability to run, total yardage, right? Looking down the road. He's not a quarterback that's going to throw for 275, 300 a week. That's not what the veer and shoot is. That's not what this offense is. It's we're going to run it down your throat, try and stop us if you can with some misdirection out of the RPO. On defense, as far as a name you maybe I'm sure a lot of people have heard of, but maybe outsiders who don't pay attention to SEC football, maybe someone like Bumper Pool. I think at the end of the day, he really is a first or second team all-conference caliber linebacker. That's what he is, potentially maybe a third team All-American. I think he's in that category of someone who could do a lot of damage and rack up a lot of tackles. He's going to break the career tackle record at Arkansas this year. Yeah, he's been given a little extra time because of the COVID year, but Bumper Pool is someone to keep an eye on for sure. And then maybe Slusher, who's going to play nickel for Arkansas. He's always kind of been on the edge of someone who you need to watch out for, and then he, maybe gets a little dinged up or whatever. Slusher is someone to keep an eye on. On offense, you could just pull a name out of a hat. There's so many guys on offense I think that could be really fun to watch. Trey Knox, I think, is a 40-plus catch caliber tight end for Arkansas this year, simply because of the fact that he was a former wideout. He's transitioned to a full-time tight end. So could do some real damage in the passing game. I watched them throughout fall camp. He was targeted a lot. What little we were able to see, he was targeted a lot in fall camp. So he could have a breakout year on offense. And yeah, Jalen Catalon. I know some of you are coming in like Jalen Catalon. Mark already said we got to mark him out. So yeah, Jalen Catalon he's your All-American. He's going to be spectacular.
Sure. Steve, I apologize if I missed this during your opening take, but was there a starting quarterback announced by Luke Fickell between Ben Hart and between Prater and Ben Hart? Okay. So we could see both. We could see who knows. But Ben Hart's the thrower, Eastern Michigan, of course, 14 touchdowns last year, led them to a decent season. And then you got Prater's the athlete. Should be interesting there. Anybody else to look out for on the Cincinnati side for those watching the Bearcats for the first time?
I would expect Ben Bryant to get the role. He's actually started games at Cincinnati before. He started the 2019 game against Memphis on rivalry week, 1 week before they rematched in the AAC championship game, and almost led them to victory over the Tigers. Decent game for him, but he just has a lot more collegiate experience under his belt in game. So I think that he's going to win the role after that year he had at Eastern Michigan. And then other names to watch, I think it's the Pace brothers on defense. Deshaun Pace was really their breakout star defensively last year. He was really good in the coverage game, had 4 interceptions for the team, and also established himself as a menace in the backfield, getting 9.5 tackles for loss. And his brother, Ivan Pace, transferred from Miami, Ohio. Ivan Pace is actually an NCAA record holder. He has the most sacks ever in a college football game, tying Elvis Dumervil when he got 6 sacks in his freshman season against Akron. And last year, Pace really expanded his role with the Miami Redhawks. He was the max leader in tackles, had 125, also ranked up there with Bumper Poll in the top 10 in college football as a whole. So I think that Ivan Pace is going to be a great fixture to this offense, one that can really re-spark its pass rush after losing Curtis Brooks. And I think that Cincinnati is going to be fine defensively after that addition from the transfer portal.
Steve Helwick, Underdog Dynasty, Hustle Belt, SB Nation. Get on over there, check out Steve's work. And of course, Ty Hudson. There it is, hogville.net. Hogville right here on YouTube. Get there. Check out Arkansas football coverage right there. Gentlemen, we appreciate you stopping by as always.
Thank you. Looking forward to this game.
Thanks for having me on, Mark.
And I will let you both know that I've got a 24-hour marathon coming up Thursday at 4 a.m. Eastern time. So I'm sure both of you will be tucked away snoozing at that point. But I'll probably just throw a link out there to you two and many others to say, hey, drop by sometime during the day and keep me awake. So if you've got a chance on Thursday, do so.
I'm a night owl. You'll never know when you'll catch me.
I've got to get my kids up in the morning, but for school. But I might stop by. You never know.
4 a.m. to 4 a.m. It's 24 hours.
Yeah. Well, I'll definitely have to try and check that out. That'll be a lot of fun.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot.